Aaron, do we think this is a problem, or do you think that Keir Starmer doesn't need to say what Labour's going to do, and it doesn't matter to him what labels are pinned on him at this point in the electoral cycle when it looks like he's set fair for Downing Street?
Oh, good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Aaron.
Politically speaking, I don't think it matters. And that's quite obvious from the polling right now. And I don't think that's necessarily because of the political skill of Keir Starmer, although one has to take one's hat off to him, but also because of what's going on right now with the Conservative Party. But there are consistent polling leads of around 20%. So politically, I don't think he needs to start talking about big ideas and how he'll transform Britain. And as you say, put clear red water between him and the Conservative Party.
As Mick Lynch said. I mean, but
yeah,
it's going to be a clever phrase, isn't it, going forward?
It's a great phrase.
Yeah,
it's a great phrase.
Go on, Aaron.
But at the same time, the country does face massive, massive, massive problems, which are only going to get worse next year. Right now, the base rate of interest, all your listeners know this, it relates to the price of their mortgage and whatnot, is 5%. Right now, it looks by January, February next year, it'll be around 7%. So mortgages and access to credit will be even more expensive. All the crises we talk about, so frequently, the housing crisis, people struggling with their business on the high street, et cetera, none of this is getting any better. And my worry is, Rachel, that Keir Starmer comes into 10 Downing Street and he hasn't any real sort of possibility of offering big propositional politics because he's not walked people through it. And we're in a moment where people understand the problems are big, therefore the solutions need to be big too. And I'll give you a few examples of this. Right now, a massive majority of Conservative Party voters, not the public, Conservative Party voters, support bringing water back into public ownership. They hear the story about Thames Water next year looking to increase water bills by as much as 50%. They look at the fact that the water industry, since it was privatised in the late 1980s, they've given shareholders 70 billion.
No, we know about Thames Water and how privatisation has fleeced the consumer. Well, no, water bills are quite low, but how they've profited from the privatisation of water. But what's Labour saying about water?
Well, this is precisely the point. So I think this is such a cast iron issue. It shouldn't even be party political. I'm on the left. It doesn't even need to be ideological. The argument for public ownership of water is overwhelming. And furthermore, the electorate are very happy to embrace it. And yet Labour won't talk about it. And I don't know why.
And therefore, you think Sir Keir Starmer should be staking out his position on these concrete subjects like water or the public sector pay rises or the nationalisation of other industries, for example, rail. And he's not. But he doesn't need to, does he?
Well, I think he does. He's going to govern the country. So this is a very good strategy from opposition. It's a great strategy from opposition. But when you're in office, you're going to need to have a story about what you want to achieve and how you're going to do it. And that story needs to begin before you take office. That's something Tony Blair did ahead of May 1997. It's not something we're seeing now. And briefly, Keir Starmer doesn't need to offer 1,001 policies. He can pick 2 or 3 big challenges and say, I'm going to act decisively on this. He's not doing it.
Well, you heard Mick Lynch's, letter to Father Christmas. If Keir Starmer could, deliver on, come down the chimney and do some things, I thought they sounded pretty good. I mean, a national care service. It's, this is something that successive governments or successive prime ministers have promised. Not one of them has delivered, especially the last several Tory prime ministers. This is, I think, really a space of clear red water that Keir Starmer could occupy. Why isn't he committing to a national care service, for example?
It's a great question. And I think there's a few answers. I think first and foremost, we have to engage with the very real possibility he doesn't know what he believes in. And I'm not saying this lightly, but there was a great article in the Sunday Times in 2021, and he was doing basically economics for dummies with Lord Falconer and Ed Miliband. Because Keir Starmer came late into politics, he has a rough idea of his values, but in terms of how you want to run the economy, do you want an industrial policy, trade policy? I feel like he's making up a lot of it as he goes along. So, for instance, we had this recent mission with regards to education, and he talked about oracy, this word that nobody normal has ever heard of before.
I'd never heard of it either. What does it mean? People being able to speak properly?
Well, I think it means rhetoric. And I think it's one of those great policies,
Doesn't exist,
Rachel.
that word. Literally, he's made that up. Go on, Aaron.
It's one of those policies. Look, I bash Boris, your brother, as much as anybody else. If Boris Johnson said we need to teach rhetoric in schools, the Guardian and the BBC would have smashed him to bits. Keir Starmer said the same thing. He just made up a new word for it. That's one of those strange, funny sort of political points. But anyway, I feel like there's not.
What the thing that you've said that has really jumped out at me, and I wonder if our audience agree. Not even Keir Starmer knows what Keir Starmer stands for. 0345 606 0973. Do you agree with Aaron Bastani that is a likelihood at this point as he faces, governing the country? How can somebody govern the country if they don't know what they want to do? Over to you, Aaron. Can you answer that?
Well, it's a great question. I think he wants to basically, the man is a very, very high achieving lawyer. He's a functionary. He wants to basically manage the country. But the problem is the challenges are massive at the moment, and sort of basic management caretaker politics isn't going to cut it. And my worry is within about 6 months, that will be very obvious to the electorate. So he needs to get in now and create that story about what he's going to do to make things better. We're not hearing it.
Do you think he has got some huge policy bazooka up his sleeve that he is going to be able to unleash and fire, in the run-up to the general election? Something really big and eye-catching. It seems to me that he is being slightly outrun by the Tories at the moment. They've made an offer. They've accepted the pay board's recommendations. They're floating this idea of an inheritance tax, abolishing inheritance tax. It's an unpopular tax. It will play very well in the blue wall, probably play very well in the red wall because people's houses have gone up so much in value. Labour hasn't countered with anything eye-catching and red meat for its base. Or am I wrong?
No, I think there's definitely something to that. And I think Labour are on for a decisive majority. But of course, things change in politics. I think you're right. We could see a situation where the Tories have a game-changing policy. I think inheritance tax is something, like you say, for their base. Would it give them a majority? I don't know. But it would certainly probably stop a fair few seats going Lib Dem in the South. I think that's right. And it could be a variable. And right now, the worry has to be, it's an accomplishment for Keir Starmer that they have this massive polling lead. Don't sit on it, because you're going to create a policy vacuum.
Grow it.
Yeah, we saw in 2017, right? Theresa May took things for granted in 2017. There was a policy vacuum. Labour came from nowhere. There was a hung parliament. It can happen.
Just before I let you go, if you were advising Sir Keir Starmer, do you have a policy that you think he should be advocating, which people would think, yes, this is what Keir Starmer's Labour Party stands for. I get it now. I'm going to give them my vote. I trust he's a fiscal conservative, so that's good. I don't need to worry about my wealth. I don't need to worry about my house. I don't need to worry about my children not being able to, get my money. But this is the positive offer. And what would it be?
I'd have three. Do I have time to say
three?
Yeah,
quickly though. Yeah.
I'd scrap police and crime commissioners. I would scrap the House of Lords. And I would say within 5 years, we will recruit enough nurses to make up for the shortfall, which is presently 50,000 nurses in the NHS.
OK, I think that's pretty good buffet of options for the Labour Party to contemplate. And also you.